All right, we are back live for the weekly SKTLs volunteer/community call with our normal gang of all-stars plus a new one. Aaron's over there from Space Ventures. Aaron, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get going today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And Cody will join, I'm assuming momentarily, so I can thank him for inviting me in. Dan and I go back quite a ways, I think, through a variety of different connection points. But what we're doing at Space Ventures is building a hyper-focused, vertically integrated digital back office neo broker for space capital. So what I do on a day-to-day basis is hopefully talk to as many or more space companies than anyone else. At least that's what I need to be doing. So I try and just be aware of as many the early stage space companies that are happening primarily in the private markets, and just get a sense of what's coming next, because ultimately I want to be the next I want to invest in the next 10 SpaceXs, right, from a value and innovation perspective. Not necessarily from a launch company perspective, but that's what we do.
Yeah, I'll just add that what Aaron has built something. Aaron's built something really special, and we always talk about the investment side and all these startups, and where do they get started and what's the right environment for them from a capitalization standpoint. But what Aaron's been able to do is he not only can provide access to capital, but at the same time help them get on their feet and get the right legs under the business from a back office standpoint. So it was a capability and a service, if you will, kind of like capital as a service, that really didn't exist before. And so it's, I think we're going to see a lot of success stories, several of which I've probably talked about here already, that I know of personally that have really got their start working with Aaron.
And I guess, I would just ask the question right now, just gauging the health of markets and whatnot. I mean, how is, I don't want to say business, but just your feel of the overall market and demand with current conditions? Because obviously, with banking troubles and interest rate troubles and all that, but space is, we talk to Dan here every week. I mean, it's hot. We're like in the first few pitches of the first inning, it seems like. So how's that appear from your side, Aaron?
Yeah, so from an early stage, and it's not just early stage, but generally, space capital perspective, space companies need a lot of money compared to, let's say, like a SaaS company or whatever. And I think that's a recurring theme that comes up when we talk about space funding in this context. But part of, I think, one of the nuances here, just like everything, a lot of your venture money is kind of, taking a beat. People are waiting to see. They're waiting to do capital calls with their LPs. If they don't have to do them, they'd love that, right? Unless there's a really high conviction. So what you're seeing is definitely a slowdown. You're definitely seeing companies that need to raise. From our perspective, since we're kind of we're a neo broker rather than a venture firm. That's good for our business fundamentally, just because that means we have a lot of companies that really need our help when we're fundraising. But from a larger perspective, one of the interesting things, I think a lot of what people kind of freeze on is when you're talking about investors, they tend to get concerned because of the long-term time horizons of space, right? Okay, 10 years, why don't I just get 5% on a 1 or 2 year note instead, right? And not worry about that really long-term time liquidity risk. So you have that's definitely something that's tampering things down. But you also have an ecosystem that is living off of and working with a lot of government contractors and things like that have been, these are processes and plans and contracts that have been in place or been working for years. Kind of the benefit of a slow-moving government organization involved, where this is something that happened several years ago, and now there's still awards and contracts being won. So what you see is a lot of companies, and this is what I've seen early stages. I can't say it's exclusively, everything that's happening in space, but it is a pretty, decent picture. You see a lot of companies focusing on those non-dilutive sources of funding, whether that's SBIR awards and grants or a variety of different things you can do. There's 2 recent announcements about big strat-fis that were just awarded, and it's a very shrewd way of combining non-dilutive funding with dilutive funding. So like Varda, for example, right, with like 60 million, they had 15 million come from the government on that one, another 15 million from NASA. I forget how exactly that contract was awarded, but those are all non-dilutive, and then they had 30 million of dilutive. So you're seeing people get creative and being forced to be a bit more creative. Luckily, in this ecosystem, it's something that's been done for a long time. This kind of funding and SBIRs and grants and stuff like that have been done for a long time. And then you also see the fact that Space Force is doubling down and getting more money, and in addition to NASA. So it tends to be a good sign for the ecosystem. So you don't see it, but I don't think you'll see as many companies falling out in the space side, assuming they had some real traction with their government partners early on.
Aaron, one of the things that we talk about, and I've mentioned this a few times, is that whereas most industries, you have the cyclicality of whatever sector it is, and as markets go, the tide rolls in and out for those companies. Whereas in space, the thing that I like to point out is that there is also a permanent 24/7 buyer in the U.S. government who doesn't really care about the economy. The appetite of Space Force, of AFRL, is continuous and, to your point, growing. And so there's a pull factor there that I think will insulate a lot of companies while the cyclicality of normal markets take place. And you mentioned StratFi, and this issue of, and this is a big demand by Space Force and AFRL. They want all the technologies they see from newer companies to be dual use. You've got to have a commercial as well as a government use for your technology, and that qualifies you for the biggest matching in the StratFi universe when you're going after that money. So there's more than enough money being thrown at things by the government, regardless of the cautionary stuff by VCs, which is why Space Ventures kind of fills a really nice niche there, because it's got to be patient capital, to Aaron's point. It's a 10 to 15 year play. And I tell people, and I tell family offices this, it's like buying infrastructure investment in the PE world. These are bridges, they're airports, it's long term, they're 10, 12, 15 year projects. This isn't, run your portfolio with a stopwatch stuff. So there's a lot of good value if these companies can find their way to the right providers. That's the trick.
And I think just to add a bit to that, what you'll start to see is over this, as companies, not as many will fall out if they're doing kind of what they should be doing on the government side of things, but they may slow down a bit in growth. You're probably going to see some opportunistic investment. You saw a guy that I don't think anyone was aware of in the space investing ecosystem, Matthew Brown, put in a bid into Virgin Orbit recently. He was like, it came out of nowhere. And I think that bid ultimately fell through, but it was like a $200 million bid to take out Virgin Orbit or get some kind of controlling share of that. And that was like kind of a big surprise. It wouldn't surprise me over the next, year, and you'll just continue to see some wrap up things. You've seen some of these like acquisitions and stuff happen, but it wouldn't surprise me to see some people kind of shopping for some deals, so to speak.
You can buy your way into the club when these things happen. And the barriers to entry for someone that wants to start a big, that wants to go head to head with the likes of, Blue and SpaceX and, even on a lower scale version, it would have to be buying your way into the club. Because starting fresh, we know we've talked a lot about the 160 launch companies out there looking to be one of the surviving 20. And I think that we saw today at the other end of the market, the mature end of the space market, we're seeing the big, SATCOs starting to come together. And so the conversation between SES and Intelsat about a possible merger, when you start seeing that, and why are they doing it? They're all trying to line up to compete with Starlink. And so there's this dynamic that's happening that's going to reorganize, restructure the entire space industry, literally, no pun intended, from the ground up. So it's going to be something that's going to create a lot of investment opportunity, but it's also going to create a lot of fog in terms of being able to separate the good stuff from the PowerPoint noise, and that continues to happen.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I guess, you know, government, two sides of it, I guess, government and private enterprise there. So I had something I had saved like late last week, and this is just, you know, some fodder to throw out there, and it's pure speculation, and it's just rumor, and I think it's nothing but that. But I just wanted to get your take on it, just from a certain point of view, because I'm not going to mention the Twitter account, but he's got like, I don't know, close to 200,000 followers. And I'm not going to give him any clout by mentioning it on here, but I'll just read the tweet. And it was rumor the Biden administration is considering blocking private space corporations from doing their thing in space. SpaceX's and other space companies' successes concern the federal government. So any thoughts on that?
I'm sure Dan has some thoughts.
Where to begin, right?
First. Yeah. My initial thought is, whenever you hear a rumor like that, it's a bit concerning, especially as someone investing in the private ecosystem. To me, it sounds a bit baseless. Maybe that's a biased thing for me to say, but you have to realize, like, just look at the number. If Biden was to, if this administration or any administration was to, essentially nationalize and pull us back to, just relying on SLS or anything like that, you'd have to realize right now, we're just about even a little bit more as far as number of launches from the US than China. Taking a step back to where we're now like a sixth or something of what the Chinese are launching. So you would have to do that. You would have to have a really good case. And I would guesstimate, do you want to put yourself in a second chair to China in the space race, which is clearly happening right now. It's just a very big thing. So for me, I think the incentives do not align for that to make sense. Would someone have suggested doing something like that, or have, there's always someone in Congress suggesting something really, a lot like this, anti-capitalistic and stuff like that. So there's always someone there. I wouldn't be surprised that it's a thing, but it sounds like it doesn't have much teeth to me.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to hand China space and you want to hand them the next 100 years, sure, roll us back to the 60s. And I mean, that's simply, and it's not oversimplifying, that's simply what that would do. I think to a lesser degree, and I would say a degree where it wouldn't warrant a rumor attached to the White House, but to a lesser degree, anybody who's against the capitalism approach to space, which also takes advantage of this country's greatest strength, competitive strength, which is our free market and all of our brilliant young minds creating technology, is that, it's a control issue. We want to control what goes on. And Elon thumbing his nose, years ago and saying, I'm going to Mars and you can't stop me and I don't need your permission. That upsets some of the old dogs or some of the people who are just afraid of capitalism. And I think if it was somebody like that, it wouldn't be much of a rumor. They'd have to attach it to the administration or something to get any legs under the rumor. But I don't really think there's anything to it, nor would it stand a snowball's chance in where of gaining any traction on Capitol Hill. Because when you look at the distribution of jobs in the space industry, and NASA was designed this way in the very beginning, facilities and jobs were put everywhere there was a senator who had a vested interest in supporting the program. And you look at the space community, it isn't the sole domain of one state. It's every major population center has a segment of the space industry that it relies on. So, it would be political suicide for somebody in Congress to want to do this. And it would be economic suicide for the country to do it, competitively and financially.
Well put. Well put. Just my
So-
last, I guess, question would just be for Aaron. Have you heard of SKTLs crypto, or how did you kind of just get involved, like in the loop here?
Just in preparation for this, got connected with Cody and Bryce at 10,000 Days, and we were just talking because there's a lot of mutual interest in shared space companies and deal flow and stuff like that. And so he's like, "Hey, you should come and join us." And I'm always down to talk. Maybe that's a problem I have. I'm willing to talk a lot about space, but always down to talk a little about it. So really just kind of preparing and talking or to be on this. That's really the only thing I've had. So, I got to know a little bit about it, understand that, the general gist, but not all the details. So don't quiz me on it, please.
Will not. Don't worry. Don't worry. Anybody else, Joe, Sanasi, questions, comments?
None from me.
I commented on Dan's the link that Dan sent, in the Slack channel regarding actually. I don't know if you saw my comment or not. So it's regarding basically testing and learning from failures, and I added a link there myself. It's about one of the, I guess, best programmers who worked on the early Apollo missions from MIT, and you might have seen actually her picture next to a stack of printouts. And the reason why I like the link that Dan sent is that Margaret Hamilton had a story to tell about her little girl, and she took her little daughter with her when she was working not only during the day, late hours, and while she was actually doing testing on the software, and her daughter basically had the keyboard and played with the simulator, and basically she triggered an error, and it's like the response was, well, this cannot happen, and surely it did. So I never forget that. And yes, testing this stuff is extremely critical. And I've learned from that little girl's experience, and I actually used her technique, which is pretty much for a little girl, random tapping of the keyboard and triggering some unexpected event. And I did actually use it when visiting a company. They were talking to me about testing. So I demonstrated it to them. So I asked them to take me to their lab, and they did. And I asked them, like, okay, can I do anything here? They said, yeah, and it's rock solid. And all I did was basically just plug one of the power cables. Okay, now figure out what happened. The whole thing crashed. I mean, nothing to do. That was just a simple, unexpected stuff.
Yeah.
So,
that's a great story, Sanatsi. Aaron is referring. I posted a link to Rick Tumlinson's recent op-ed, just talking about the heritage and NASA's fear of failure, to the point where it puts them in a position where they and the risk taking that goes on in the private sector, and why you have to blow a few rockets up before you get one that flies straight. And so this notion that relativity was successful, where a lot of people are saying, gee, it wasn't, it didn't get to orbit. And he goes back to the media being those responsible in the early days of Apollo for, oh, look at all. And today, if you watch old documentaries, what do they show? All the rockets blowing up. in the early 60s and late 50s. So yeah, we just have to accept it. Elon says, gee, space is hard. It's damn dangerous. And there's some stuff I believe that's coming up. I don't know if it was, History Channel or something, but it's talking about these people risk their lives. There was a reason why all the early astronauts were test pilots. It wasn't because they were the only ones crazy enough. It was they understood risk. They knew that they might not come home every time they went out and jumped on a plane, and those were the requirements for a long time in the beginning at NASA. 10,000 hours of fighter pilot time, and test pilot specifically. Way back when I was sending a letter every week to NASA as a kid. So it's people have to learn that. We're going to lose people. There's going to be something ugly that'll happen, God forbid, something ugly is going to happen on the moon, on the way to Mars or at Mars, or this is not, as much as Elon will do thousands of launches of Starship before he puts people on it, it doesn't mean that, technology's perfect. It's not. Technology breaks. It breaks.
And I'll to be fair to the media, at one point I was moonlighting as an influencer around space stuff, and by far the things that got the most interest, or it was definitely one of the top 5 or something, was the explosions of rockets. People just like seeing things blow up. So to be fair, they're going to show that regardless. But it's 100% true. It's like we only want to show the stuff that doesn't work. And then we make a big deal about it. Relativity is, in fact, the exact opposite story. If you dig like one layer deep, like it's the first, isn't it the first ever company to even get to space with its first orbital attempt?
3D printed.
Well, 3D printed. Like most companies, if they do it, they don't even get to space, much less orbit. And so like they were incredibly. They hit a lot of first methane rocket to orbit, first mostly 3D printed rocket to orbit. Yeah, it's
and it's to your point. It's why people go to car races, right? They go to see the crashes. I mean, people want to see a crash. They want to see something happen. And it's the old thing I like to say about the media: good news is no news. That's the reality of it. There's got to be something that's a headline grabber. Otherwise, it's pretty boring stuff.
We haven't evolved much since the gladiatorial days.
Yeah.
I'm a big race fan, and I guess one of the adages is people go to the track or watch it on TV to see the big crash, but they also go to see the driver walk away. And unfortunately, with space and all that's involved, the driver and whoever's involved likely will not walk away. That's the big difference. Yeah.
No, that's right. That's right.
I just pasted for Aaron, actually, the Slack channel for SKTL in the chat, and also the link to the debris fund application that will award on May 6th, National Space Day.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Hope to join in with you guys.
Yeah, thanks. I guess one more question for...
Good seeing you.
Yeah, one more question for Aaron, I guess. I guess there's a lot of excitement about investing in space and, all that can be done. Imagine the possibilities and all that. But since, this is SKTLs is a coin crypto involving space debris, how knowledgeable are people that you interact with of the dangers and the ongoing and growing problem of space debris?
I would say of all the, things that go on in space, it's probably like the second most hyped thing behind SpaceX, right? It's like SpaceX, Elon generally is what'll come up, maybe something about NASA. And then, isn't there a lot of debris in space? So like from a perspective of is it getting out there? I think that the story is getting out there. That's one of the reasons why we tend to think very, two-dimensionally when we think about, trash and stuff. Like the three-dimensionality of what space is, just how vast it is, I think allows us to probably have a bit more room to play around with. But I am happy for sure that we have a lot of companies trying to tackle some of that stuff and trying to tackle some of the space debris specifically. And by the way, it's not just like, there's a variety of different technologies that can be used to do this. So, as far as I'm concerned, any kind of hype, whether it's cued as like, something negative like space debris, either way, I'm pretty happy. It gets the attention where it needs to be. And there's a lot of people doing cool stuff. You got Privateer, you've got a ton of others, in a variety of different ways they're tackling it, whether big debris, small debris. You've got people shooting lasers or want to, that's a whole nother thing. With that, it's more of a defense problem, but a lot of different things going on. And so, I think from a space debris perspective, I think most people have that basic grasp that it's a problem. I think a lot of people then kind of run away and think of like garbage patches in the ocean, right? Like that's what they immediately think of when they think of space debris. But it's not the same. It's a bit nuanced. It's a bit unique, and it's what makes it scarier is that they're moving 30. Don't even quote me on this. How many thousand miles an hour?
18,000 or something.
Yeah, right. Just moving so fast, it creates more and all that stuff. So that's where I think it gets a bit apocalyptic. But generally speaking, if you're in the industry, and to Dan's point, a lot of the people that are in the industry are like, yes, it's a problem, but totally solvable. It's not like a runaway thing where we're in a, we can't get out of orbit or into orbit ever again kind of thing.
Plus you have the Orbit Prime initiative from SpaceWorks, where you've got 90 some odd companies that got several awards for dealing with space debris, and 30 more that went direct to phase 2 on the topic. So the startup community is very focused on developing technology that can be used for that, but also be used for other things like, OTVs, orbital transfer vehicles, are a great example. So.
Yeah, I would point to that exact thing as the dichotomy that is the space debris conversation. Like you have Space Force, who's at the same time, talking about, hey, let's deal with space debris. They're pushing heavily towards this ISAM, OSAM market of let's build stuff in space, right? Like, you're talking about like actually manufacturing in space. That's going to create a lot more debris, just invariably with the way it is, right? The way that manufacturing works and all this stuff. So it's kind of an interesting thing where you have people that know best in most cases kind of saying, hey, there's still a lot of place to go. We don't need to like wait and clean it up first and then do something. We can keep progressing along and progress really fast, but keep an eye on it and have things ready to go so that we can keep that from, creating a runaway problem. So, that's what gets exciting when I think about what's next is probably ISAM, OSAM stuff happening in orbit, and you need a clean orbit, relatively clean orbit to keep that happening and not have, all the problems of space debris.
Good stuff. Thank you for that. We are at the bottom of the hour, so unless there's any other questions or comments, I guess we can do the usual wrap up here. Anybody else? Alrighty then. Well, we posted the SKTLs Space Debris Fund application there in the chat. It's also right on the SKTLs homepage. I know Sanatsi posted you are in the Slack room there, so that's there for you. And anybody, follow the SKTLs crypto on Twitter, and stay tuned for all sorts of updates, just including the award of the winners of the Space Debris Fund application. I believe Sanatsi said it was May 6th.
May 6th, yes.
Make sure I get the date right.
National Space Day.
Space Day. So, that'll do it. Well, thank you very much, of course, to all of our usual panels, and Aaron for stopping by, man. Thanks. It's so cool to have you here, man.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will see everybody next week at 4 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. Take care, everybody.